Marriage had always seemed like the ultimate sanctuary, a place where love, trust, and partnership flourished. That was the belief I held when I married Jason. Our wedding was the kind people remembered for years, a dazzling affair in the heart of Chicago, adorned with designer ensembles and champagne fountains. In those moments, everything felt flawless, as if nothing could ever go wrong. But perfection is fleeting. For years, Jason and I played the role of the ideal couple. He was making strides in finance while I balanced running my boutique with charity work. We were polished, admired, and seamlessly woven into our social circles. Yet, somewhere along the way, we became distant. Our conversations revolved around logistics and formalities, while intimacy faded beneath the weight of responsibilities and societal expectations. Then one evening, over another barely touched dinner, Jason finally broke the silence. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed uncertainty, as if he feared the words he was about to say. "Michelle, we need to talk about us." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "We've been stuck in this cycle for years. Something has to change." Initially, I assumed he meant counseling or a vacation, something typical. But Jason's idea was far from anything I had expected. He wanted to open our marriage. "You can't be serious," I said, staring as if he had lost his mind. "I am," he answered with unwavering resolve. "We're barely a couple anymore. Maybe giving each other space to explore will help us find our way back." Fury surged through me. I threw down my fork and stormed out. How could he even suggest this? Wasn't it just an excuse to cheat? Yet, his words lingered in my mind. No matter how much I resisted, I couldn't ignore the truth: we were broken. Divorce wasn't an option, not with our families, our reputation, and everything we had built at stake. A week later, he brought it up again, and this time, I listened. "It's not about cheating," he insisted. "It's about rediscovering ourselves, what we mean to each other. I don't want to lose you, Michelle." I hated the idea, but the thought of losing my marriage was even worse. So, with hesitation, I agreed under strict conditions. No one from our inner circle, total honesty about who we saw, and the right to end it whenever either of us felt uncomfortable. It was meant to be temporary, a way to reclaim what we had lost. Jason adapted quickly. Within weeks, he was his charming self again, donning tailored suits and smiling as he left for business meetings that had nothing to do with work. He dropped subtle mentions of someone named Marissa, always careful to say just enough. I felt humiliated. My husband was out dating while I sat at home, replaying every decision that led us here. Then something shifted. If I had agreed to this, why not embrace it? Eric was my first date, a tall, charismatic architect I had met at an art exhibit months before. Hesitant but intrigued, I reached out. To my surprise, he was thrilled to hear from me. We met at a rooftop bar downtown, where he made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. By the end of the night, I felt alive again, like a part of me that had long been buried was finally resurfacing. Jason noticed almost immediately. "You seem happier," he remarked one evening as we sat in the living room. For the first time in years, I saw warmth in his eyes. "Maybe this is working," he added with a small smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. For the first time in years, we were talking, really talking. We shared stories about our dates, sometimes laughing at the awkwardness, sometimes marveling at how surreal it all felt. For a while, it seemed like we had found a rhythm. But life has a way of throwing unexpected twists, and I had no idea just how much everything was about to change. When Jason suggested opening our marriage, I never imagined it would bring me here. I had entered this arrangement reluctantly, desperate to salvage what was left of us. What I hadn't anticipated was Derek, the man who would unravel the careful balance I had so meticulously maintained. It started innocently enough. With Jason away on business, I attended a charity gala alone. By now, I was used to these events, gliding through the crowd in designer gowns, exchanging pleasantries with people I barely knew. But that night, something felt different. A hollow emptiness lingered beneath the surface, though I had no idea how much my world was about to shift. I felt like I was merely existing while everyone else around me seemed so full of life, so deeply connected. And then, as if on cue, Derek appeared just like he always did at these events. Jason's best friend, my trusted confidant, and a constant presence in our lives. He spotted me by the bar and made his way over, his smile warm and disarming. Alone tonight? His deep voice cut through the noise around us. Jason's traveling, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Well then, he said, raising his glass. Here's to keeping you company. We found a quiet corner and talked for hours. I can't even recall what we discussed only that he made me laugh, a real, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. By the time the night ended, I felt lighter, freer. When he walked me to my car, I thought it was just another evening with Derek. But then he kissed me, and in that moment, my world shifted. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a spark, a jolt of something I hadn't felt in so long. His hands were firm, his lips demanding, and for the first time in years, I felt truly wanted. When I pulled away, breathless, I whispered, "We shouldn't." But I didn't mean it. The next time we met, it wasn't by chance, it was intentional. Derek texted me the day after the gala, asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. I should have said no, but I didn't. When lunch turned into drinks at his apartment, I didn't stop him when he kissed me again. This time, it didn't end with a kiss. Derek was nothing like Jason in bed. He was confident, commanding, and attentive in a way Jason had never been. He knew exactly how to touch me, how to awaken something in me I hadn't even realized was dormant. And yes, he was more than Jason, not just physically, but in how he used it. With Derek, I felt things I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He made me feel seen, desired, and completely out of control. That first time became a second, then a third. I told myself it was just an escape, something temporary. But deep down, I knew better. I was in over my head. Jason, for his part, seemed oblivious at first, caught up in his own escapades. He came home late, casually mentioning Marissa or whoever he was seeing that week. We still shared stories about our dates, carefully avoiding the messy details. He suspected nothing until he did. It happened at a dinner party we hosted. Derek was there, of course, sitting across from me at the table. Every time our eyes met, I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I couldn't stop thinking about the way he touched me, the way he made me feel. Jason noticed. Later that night, after the guests had left, he cornered me in the kitchen. "Is there something going on with you and Derek?" His voice was low but firm. I froze. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Michelle. I've known him for years. I can tell when something's off." I wanted to deny it, but the guilt was written all over my face. "End it," Jason said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Whatever this is, it stops now. This wasn't the deal." But how could I end it when I didn't want to? Derek wasn't just another fling, had become a lifeline, a reminder of everything I had been missing. Jason had wanted this open marriage, and now that I had found something real, he wanted to take it away. It felt unfair. Hypocritical. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while Jason slept beside me. I couldn't imagine letting Derek go. With him, I felt alive. With him, I was a version of myself I thought I had lost forever. Jason wanted me to choose him or Derek. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to make that choice. Not yet. When Jason gave me the ultimatum, I thought I could bury my feelings for Derek and move forward. I convinced myself I could balance both worlds, the stability of my marriage and the passion I had discovered with Derek. But the more I tried to suppress it, the more it consumed me. Jason wasn't blind. He started watching me more closely, his casual questions laced with suspicion. "Where are you going? Who's texting you this late?" His interrogations became routine. I brushed them off as best I could, but Derek was always on my mind. And Derek wasn't making it any easier. He sent late-night texts, reminding me of the moments we shared, the way he made me feel. Sometimes, he'd call just to say he missed me. And God help me, I missed him too. One Saturday morning, Jason finally confronted me. Breakfast was tense, the silence suffocating. Finally, he set his coffee mug down and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Michelle," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "We need to talk." As Jason sat across from me, I knew what was coming. "I don't think this is working anymore," he said, his voice steady yet strained. "This open marriage, it's not bringing us closer. If anything, it's tearing us apart." Guilt crept in, but I wasn't ready to surrender. "Jason, this was your idea." I reminded him, keeping my tone even. "And it was a mistake," he admitted. But we can still fix this, we just need to go back to close the marriage, to focus on us. The problem was, I didn't want to go back. Not if it meant losing Derek. Are you saying this because you're done with Marissa, or because you don't want me to see Derek? I asked, sharper than I intended. Jason's jaw tightened. I'm saying it because I want my wife back. I want us back. It was a nice sentiment, but it wasn't that simple. Derek had ignited something in me, a fire, a hunger, a need I hadn't known existed. With him, I felt alive in a way Jason could never make me feel. It wasn't just physical, though that was undeniable. Derek understood how to touch me, how to move with me, how to make me lose control. Jason was steady, dependable, but with Derek, I was on fire. And once you've felt that kind of heat, it's hard to go back to lukewarm. I don't know if I'm ready to close the marriage, I admitted carefully, avoiding Jason's gaze. His face fell, disappointment radiating from him. Michelle, you're risking everything, our life, our marriage, everything we've built together. I know, I whispered, but even as I said it, my mind was elsewhere. On Derek. On the way he held me the last time we were together, whispering in my ear how much he wanted me, how much he needed me. Jason pushed back from the table without another word, retreating to his office to brood. I knew I had hurt him, but I couldn't bring myself to feel remorse. Not yet. Later that day, Derek called. Without hesitation, I slipped into the guest room, away from Jason's prying eyes. I can't stop thinking about you, Derek said, his voice low and rough. Derek, I don't know what to do, I confessed. Jason wants me to end this, to close the marriage. And what do you want? He asked. The question hanging in the air like a challenge. What did I want? I wanted both Jason's stability and Derek's passion. But life doesn't work that way. I want you, I said finally, the words escaping before I could stop them. Silence stretched between us before Derek finally spoke. Then don't let him take this away from us. His words echoed in my mind long after we ended the call. By the time I went to bed that night, I knew one thing: I couldn't walk away from Derek. Not yet. The days that followed were tense. Jason grew distant, his anger simmering beneath the surface. I could tell he was trying to hold on, but every time I looked at him, all I could think about was how much he paled in comparison to Derek. Then came the breaking point. Jason confronted me late one night, catching me off guard as I scrolled through my phone. Are you still seeing him? He asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharp and dangerous. I didn't answer, and my silence was all the confirmation he needed. This has to stop, Michelle, he said, his voice rising. If you don't end it, I don't know how we're supposed to move forward. It was an ultimatum, and I hated him for it. How could he expect me to give up the one thing that made me feel alive? How could he expect me to go back to a life of monotony and routine? I need time, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Time for what? Jason shot back. To decide if you want your marriage or my best friend. The words stung, but they weren't untrue. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and no matter which way I stepped, someone was going to fall. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Jason slept beside me. My mind raced with questions, doubts, and fears. I knew I was playing with fire, but the thought of giving up Derek felt impossible. For the first time in my life, I had no idea what to do. I wasn't sure if my marriage was worth saving anymore. Jason had never been the type to give up easily. I knew that when I married him, and it was one of the reasons I stayed as long as I did. But what I hadn't anticipated was just how far he'd go when pushed into a corner. After our confrontation, Jason became someone I hardly recognized. He wasn't shouting or making accusations. Instead, he was quiet, too quiet. The man who had once been my dependable, straightforward husband had turned calculating, strategic. I should have seen it coming. One evening, as I was getting ready to meet Derek, Jason appeared in the doorway of our bedroom. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching me. Where are you going? He asked, his tone deceptively calm. Out, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. With Derek? I froze, my hand hovering over the clasp of my necklace. Jason, we've been over this. No, Michelle, you've been over this. I'm not done talking about it. I turned to face him, ready to argue, but his expression stopped me. His eyes weren't just angry, they were hurt. This isn't fair, he said, his voice quieter now. I agreed to this because I thought it would bring us back together. But instead, you've replaced me. I didn't know how to respond. Was he wrong? Maybe. Maybe not. Jason, you wanted this too. You've been seeing other people, just like I have. Yeah, he shot back. But it was never about replacing you. It was supposed to help us find our way back to each other. But now, I don't even know if there's an us left to save. For a moment, guilt surged through me. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him I understood. But then I thought of Derek's touch, his kiss, the way he made me feel, and I held back. I'm not ready to end this, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason's expression hardened, and in that moment, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. You're making a choice, Michelle, he said, his tone icy. And it's not me. He walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. My heart was racing, but not with fear. With anger. How dare he try to guilt me after all the years of neglect? After all the times he put work, appearances, and status before our marriage? But Jason wasn't done yet. The next day, Derek texted, asking if I could come over. I didn't hesitate. The moment I stepped through his door, he pulled me into his arms, his lips capturing mine with an urgency that made me forget everything else. With Derek, there was no pretending. No pressure to be the perfect wife. I could just be Mara, vulnerable, completely undone. He didn't just touch my body, he awakened something deeper, something primal. Stay, he whispered afterward, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my back. I can't, I murmured, even though every fiber of me wanted to. You deserve better than this, Michelle, Derek said, his voice firm. Better than being torn between two lives. I knew he was right. But what choice did I have? Leaving Jason wasn't an option, not with everything we'd built, the life we'd created together. I just need more time, I said, avoiding his gaze. Derek sighed but didn't push. When I got home that evening, Jason was waiting. He was sitting in the living room, his laptop open in front of him. We need to talk, he said, his tone clipped. I sat across from him, already bracing for another fight. But what he said next left me speechless. I talked to Derek. My blood ran cold. What? You heard me, Jason said, his eyes narrowing. I called him, told him this thing between you two ends now. A surge of anger, unlike anything I had ever felt, shot through me. You had no. Derek stepped aside, silently inviting me in. I know, I said, my voice trembling. But no matter how much I tried to stay away, I couldn't. We stood there in silence, the tension between us almost suffocating. Finally, he spoke. You need to choose, Michelle, him or me. You can't keep living in this limbo. I know, I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. I want you, Michelle, I always have, he said, his voice steady. But I can't be the reason your marriage falls apart. That has to be your decision. His words hit me like a gut punch. He was offering me an out, a way to walk away without guilt. But could I really leave Jason? Could I dismantle the life we'd built for something so uncertain? That night, I went home and found Jason waiting for me, his face lined with worry. Where were you? He asked, but there was no accusation in his voice. I needed time to think, I admitted. As I looked at him, the man who had been my partner for so many years, I felt a deep sadness. I thought about Derek, about the passion and fire he had reignited in me. But I also thought about the chaos, the hurt, and the destruction I had caused by trying to have it all. I want to try, I said finally. I want to fix us. Jason's shoulders slumped in relief, but there was hesitation in his eyes. This won't be easy, Michelle. I know, I whispered, tears streaming down my face.